Look at your own hand for a second. Somewhere inside every cell in it is a clock. Not one that ticks in seconds, but one that has been running since before language, before agriculture, before the pyramids. Scientists can read that clock. And in 2010, when they finally opened it for one small group of people in southern Africa, the number that came back didn't just surprise them. It rewrote the family tree of our entire species. For most of your life, you've probably heard a simple version of the human story. We all came out of Africa, spread across the planet, and became the billions of us alive today. Neat, linear, comfortable. But genetics doesn't work like a straight line. It works like a river splitting into channels, some flowing far longer than others before they ever reach the sea. And when researchers actually measured how old different populations' DNA really is, one group's channel turned out to be flowing almost twice as long as anyone expected. This isn't a story about who came first in some competition. It's stranger than that. It's a story about a handful of hunter-gatherers in a desert who, without ever knowing it, were carrying the deepest, most unbroken thread of human genetic history on Earth. While the rest of us, from Beijing to Berlin to Buenos Aires, are all comparatively young branches on the same old tree. By the end of this video, you'll understand why age, in genetics, is not what you think it is, and why the answer changes how we should think about every population on the planet, including your own. To understand this mystery, travel back roughly 200,000 years, long before Egypt, before Mesopotamia, before anything we'd call civilization. Southern Africa's landscape then was not the postcard Kalahari of today. It shifted between lush wetlands and dry scrubland as the climate swung across tens of thousands of years, forcing early humans to adapt again and again to survive. Somewhere in these shifting environments lived the ancestors of a people who would later be called the San, and their close relatives the Kuko, together known as the Kusan. They were not primitive relics frozen in time. They were fully modern humans, hunting, gathering, tracking animals across vast distances, and passing down oral knowledge that let them read the desert like a map. What made them extraordinary wasn't visible at all. It was buried in their genes. Around 100,000 years ago, and possibly earlier, something happened that would echo for millennia. The population that would become the Khoisan split away from the ancestors of every other human being on Earth. This split occurred deep inside Africa, long before any human had crossed into Europe, Asia, or the Americas. Every non-Khoisan person alive today, every European, every East Asian, every Native American, every South Asian, descends from a branch that separated afterward. For decades, anthropologists debated what this meant. Some assumed the Khoisan were simply an isolated offshoot, interesting but marginal to the main human story. Genetic evidence painted a very different picture, because they remained relatively isolated from other groups for so long. Marrying within their communities across countless generations, their DNA preserved something almost nobody else's did, an unusually complete record of ancient human genetic diversity, stretching back further than any other living population. Meanwhile, everyone else's ancestors kept moving. Groups pushed north and east across Africa, eventually crossing into the Arabian Peninsula, spreading into Europe, following coastlines into Asia, and eventually crossing into the Americas. Each migration came with what geneticists call a bottleneck, a small founding group carrying only a fraction of the genetic diversity of the population left behind. Every bottleneck narrowed the river a little more. By the time modern population geneticists began sequencing full genomes in the early 2000s, they expected variation. What they didn't expect was the sheer scale of the difference. When the first complete Khoisan genome was published in 2010, alongside a genome from a Banda-speaking South African, researchers found over 1 million previously undocumented genetic variants in just 5 individuals. That's not a rounding error. That's a signature of extraordinary depth. So here is the puzzle historians and geneticists now had to solve together. If age in genetics isn't about who physically arrived somewhere first, but about how much ancestral diversity a lineage retained, what does oldest actually mean? And if the deepest human lineage on the planet had been hiding in plain sight in the Kalahari all along, what else had science gotten wrong about how we rank human history? To understand why the Khoisan result stunned researchers, you need to understand what geneticists actually mean by old DNA. It has nothing to do with fossils or artifacts. It means something more like this. How far back in time do the deepest branches of your ancestry reach before they connect to everyone else's? Every population carries genetic variants, tiny differences in DNA sequence built up over generations. Populations that split off early and stayed relatively isolated keep accumulating unique variants nobody else has, while also retaining old variants that other groups lost through bottlenecks. Researchers found that the Khoisan carry substantially more of this ancestral diversity than any other studied population. Evidence of a genetic divergence estimated between 100,000 and over 200,000 years ago, depending on the method used. Compare that to, say, European or East Asian populations. Their ancestors left Africa an estimated 50 to 70,000 years ago. carrying only a slice of the diversity that existed on the continent at the time. Every subsequent migration into Siberia, across the Bering Land Bridge, into Scandinavia, added new adaptations, but shed diversity rather than gained it. Geneticists sometimes describe this as serial founder effect. Each new frontier population is a smaller sample of the one before it. That is why, genetically speaking, indigenous populations of the Americas show some of the least ancestral diversity of any humans on Earth, despite having complex, ancient civilizations of their own. Genetic age and cultural age are not the same measurement at all. This is where it becomes critical to be precise. Scientists are not saying the Khoisan are more evolved, more advanced, or somehow biologically superior. Evidence suggests the opposite point entirely. Every human alive today is the same species, separated only by how much of our shared ancestral toolkit each lineage happened to retain. One leading theory proposes that if you want to find the widest range of humanity's original genetic variation, southern Africa is where you look. Not because anyone there is special in a hierarchical sense, but because history simply didn't erase as much there. Researchers also found something else remarkable. Traces of Khoisan-related ancestry, in smaller amounts, show up in populations across eastern and central Africa too, hinting at ancient contact and intermixing that current models are still working to fully map. Some studies even suggest deep structure within Africa itself may go back further than researchers assumed, meaning the full picture of how old is human DNA is still being written. And here's the twist that keeps scientists up at night. If genetic age depends on isolation and retained diversity rather than migration distance, that means somewhere on Earth, other populations may hold ancestral signals we simply haven't sequenced deeply enough yet to find. The ranking we have today, with Khoisan lineages at the very top, might not be the final answer. It might just be the first chapter of a much longer investigation. So what does it actually mean that one small population in the Kalahari carries the deepest genetic memory of our species? It means the story of human origins is not a straight road from Africa outward, with everyone ending up equally far from the start. It is a tree where one branch stayed rooted closer to the trunk, while every other branch, including yours and mine, grew outward and thinner over tens of thousands of years. It also means the old assumption, that history and technology measure how advanced a people are, collapses under genetic evidence. The Khoisan, holders of humanity's oldest surviving lineage, lived as hunter-gatherers for millennia, not because they were left behind by progress, but because their environment and their choices shaped a different, equally valid human story. Meanwhile, populations with comparatively younger DNA built empires, cities, and technologies. Genetic age and civilizational achievement, it turns out, have almost nothing to do with each other. There is something quietly moving in that. Somewhere in the Kalahari today, communities descended from the deepest root of humanity still speak languages built on clicks that linguists believe may echo some of the oldest sounds our species ever made. When researchers sequence their genomes, they are not just gathering data. They are reading the closest thing science has to humanity's original manuscript, the version before all the edits, migrations, and rewrites that produced the rest of us. And perhaps that's the real revelation hiding inside this ranking. Age, in genetics, isn't about who arrived first at greatness. It's about who never had to leave. Every person watching this carries a piece of that same ancient river inside them, just diluted by tens of thousands of years and thousands of kilometers of migration. The Khoisan simply kept more of the original water flowing. The next time someone tells you humanity's story is a simple line from Africa to everywhere else, remember the desert that shocked the scientists who thought they already understood where we all came from. If you want to keep uncovering the hidden science behind human history, subscribe and join us for the next investigation.